Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked on Wolves. Today on the show, I'll tell you why D'Angelo Russell is having the best season of his career so far. That's right, even better than his All-Star season when he was with the Brooklyn Nets. Plus, ESPN has finally released their real plus minus metric to this point in the season, and Karl-Anthony Towns is actually not the top-rated Timberwolf, although there are three Wolves in the top 50. We're going to talk all about it on the show here today. Welcome in. You are Locked on Wolves.
You are Locked on Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked on Wolves podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked on Wolves. I'm also the editor of Dunking with Wolves, the Timberwolves site and the Fansided Network. Happy Thursday, everybody. Packed show today. Plenty to talk about here. The Wolves are still a game away, or a day away, I should say, from playing against the Thunder. The Timberwolves have that 2-day break in between yet another set of back-to-backs. So we'll talk about that Friday, but plenty else to get to here today. First of all, thank you for making Locked on Wolves your first listen each and every day. Of course, Locked on Wolves is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Odyssey, anywhere you like to listen to shows. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked on T-Wolves and at Beecken with two B's, two E's, C-K-E-N. All right. Today here on the show, I want to jump right into talking about D'Angelo Russell. He's had a phenomenal season so far. I want to talk about why it's the best year of his career so far, despite the fact he was an all-star with Brooklyn several years ago. Well, not that long ago, like 3 years ago. And then I also want to talk about ESPN's real plus minus metric. We'll get more into that here later. The Timberwolves have 3 players in the top 50. ESPN put this out for the first time so far this season, just the other day, I guess last week. And there's a surprising number 1 ranked Wolves player who's actually top 20 in the league. So I want to get to that. And then we'll close by looking at the Western Conference standings and Denver, a surprising loss on Wednesday. And the Timberwolves are, with their hot place since the All-Star break, are kind of right where they were a week ago, despite Denver's recent 6-game winning streak of their own. So a ton to get to here today. Let's open with the D'Lo conversation. So D'Angelo Russell, let's talk about his season specifically first. This to me, to this point, and we're 3/4 of the way through the schedule. There's still some basketball to be played. This has been the best season of his career so far. Now the shooting percentages are down, and I get that, and they have been all season. If you just look at raw field goal percentage or 3-point percentage, this is his worst 3-point percentage since his second season in the league, and it's only what a tenth of a percentage better than what it was his rookie year, which was his career worst. His field goal percentage is the lowest that it's been since his third season in the league. But the effective field goal percentage is identical to what it was in his all-star season with the Brooklyn Nets back in 2018, 2019, when he led the Nets to the playoffs. That was an identical effective field goal percentage to what he has today. And that tells a lot more of the story than just say raw field goal percentage. And the reason why essentially is he's shooting more threes and less twos. And which, by the way, that's related. He's shooting the highest 3-point rate of his career, meaning he's shooting 3-pointers more frequently than at any other season in his career so far. And overall, that at the end of the day, that's a good thing. Even if he's shooting them at a slightly lower clip in terms of overall percentage, shooting more of them is a positive. His free throw rate is also at a career best. And now I talked about this a little bit as a post-game takeaway the other day. I mean, the rip through move thing for D'Angelo Russell has been phenomenal. That's been kind of his bread and butter to get to the free throw line. He has not been a guy throughout his career that's a high free throw rate guy. He doesn't get to the rim a lot, and that remains the case. If you look at his shooting at the rim, he's not getting to the rim any more frequently than he did early in his career. In fact, his all-star season and the season prior in Brooklyn were his highest a number of attempts or percentage of his attempts that he was getting within 3 feet of the basket. This year is right in line with the last 2 or 3 seasons, Minnesota, Golden State, and where he wound up in Brooklyn. So it's not like he's getting to the basket all that much more. He's just being smarter about drawing fouls. He talked about this post game after the win the other night. He studies Chris Paul with the rip through move. He studies Chris Paul, how he's crafty and can get fouls drawn on the opposing team when they're in the bonus. There was somebody tweeted out that he was yelling for the bench the other night when the Timberwolves were in the bonus. He was just yelling Chris Paul from the bench because it's Chris Paul time when you're in the bonus. You do whatever you can to get to the free throw line, and D'Angelo Russell is doing that this year, and the numbers bear that out. The free throw rate is the highest of his entire career, and his free throw percentage is the best of his career, which makes it all that much more important. Shooting 81.7% from the free throw line. He's only been over 80% one other time in his career. So he's improved drastically there as well. Uh, Other notable numbers, in addition to a career best free throw rate and the highest 3-point rate of his career, D'Angelo Russell's putting up the lowest turnover rate of his career. Now, part of that's because his usage rate is the lowest that it's been since his rookie year, and his assist rate's down just a little because he's playing off the ball more often with Patrick Beverly, Anthony Edwards initiating a lot of offense, the Wolves running a lot through Towns, and then also Jordan McLaughlin, especially recently, playing a lot more. So D'Lo has really just kind of been in catch and shoot mode a lot more. They've been able to run some plays to get him open shots from outside the arc. Now, he does a lot of what he does is shooting in transition anyway. That's where he gets a lot of these attempts. But still, the lowest turnover rate of his career that's impactful. And just the other night, it was actually just the win, their most recent win, when I called out D'Lo. He had a couple of really sloppy turnovers, and he had 4 for the game, and it was really kind of unnecessary. But to have your starting point guard with a 12.9% turnover rate, which is by far the lowest of his career, that's phenomenal. Um, it's also the lowest usage rate he's had since his rookie season, the lowest assist rate he's had since his second year in the league, way back with the Lakers in 16-17. Because again, catch and shoot, shooting in transition. And beyond that, I mean, D'Lo's drawing fouls in the perimeter when the Wolves are in the bonus. It's just he's playing smarter. He's now a couple of steps ahead of where he was, at least in terms of the mental game, where he was a couple of years ago. And it's really easy to forget this. He just turned 26 a week ago, literally a week ago. He's still just 26 years old. He's just got 1 year left on the contract. And this is the danger zone thing. And I don't want to ruin this conversation by talking contract about D'Angelo Russell. But I mean, he's going to be a 27-year-old looking for another max deal. And while this is the best year of his career, I'm also not suggesting the Wolves should give him a max contract once again. However, this is the best year of his career, hands down. Equal effective field goal percentage to his All-Star season, the best 3-point rate, the best free throw rate of his career, the best free throw percentage of his career, and just a solid all-around game. I want to get into ESPN Real Plus Minus here in a second, and this is a pretty good segue because the defensive metrics also show that D'Lo's very, very clearly improved on that end of the floor. And I've talked about this on the show quite a bit, but there's no question about it that D'Lo has committed himself to improving defensively, and the advanced metrics bear that out on the defensive end of the floor, and then also the overall body of work for D'Lo because of the incremental defensive improvement. And the way I've said this before on the show is the difference between terrible and average, average-ish or good is pretty much the same as the difference in a lot of cases between good and all-star level, right? Nobody's asking D'Lo to be first team all defense. No one's asking him to be Patrick Beverly. The Timberwolves simply asked him, hey, try on defense, use your size to your advantage, use your craftiness to your advantage, and be an average defender. He's done that. He's been even slightly above average according to some metrics this season. So I want to get into ESPN Real Plus Minus, and perhaps this tips it off, but the order in which the Timberwolves' best players are ranked in this metric surprised me. Even though I'll leave it at that for now. It surprised me. So I want to talk about Timberwolves players in ESPN's Real Plus Minus, and if you're not familiar, I'll briefly break that down here in a minute, and why it matters, why I think it's insightful, and then also in context of each of their individual positions, how many players the Wolves have in the top 50, that whole thing. I want to get to that here next. First, though, let's talk about our friends over at BetOnline. Football might be over, but basketball is full steam ahead for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach might land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right on down to the additional coverage and information you need about sports betting. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts. All right. Thanks again for making Locked On Wolves your first listen each and every day. A reminder that for your next listen, you can check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Okay. So we talked about D'Lo. Let's transition into NBA real plus minus. And there's more of a D'Lo conversation here as well. So if you're not familiar, the real plus minus, I should say, I said NBA, the ESPN real plus minus. This is ESPN's kind of all encompassing metric of individual performance on the court based on it's essentially it's rate based in the sense that it takes into account per 100 possessions, right? There's an offensive RPM, there's a defensive RPM, and then the total RPM, which the definition here estimated on court impact on team performance, measured in net point differential per 100 offensive and defensive possessions, takes into account teammates, opponents, and additional factors. So it's supposed to be a catch-all type metric. Certainly more so than like back in the days of PER. Like PER doesn't really tell us the whole story. There's certainly weaknesses to Basketball Reference's win shares metric, by the way, which I think can be useful given some context. But ESPN's real plus minus to me is if you're going to pick one, and that which is a dangerous thing to do, and I not at all am I about to treat this like a player ranking and say, necessarily that number one is the best player in the league and number 10 is the 10th best player in the league, because that's dangerous. That's never how this works. But if you had to pick one metric to live and die by, this is the one to me that seems to make the most sense based on how it is derived and just kind of the track record. If you go back over the years and look at where some of these players have ranked as well. So, for instance, this year's list, number one in real plus minus this year at ESPN.com is Nikola Jokic. Number two is Steph Curry. Number three is Joel Embiid. Number four is Giannis. I mean, if you ask anybody who their top four MVP candidates are, probably those four. I mean, John Morant would be the other one that's creeping into that conversation. Maybe Luka. Luka's number 8 on this list. We'll get to Ja here in a minute. But it's kind of your who's who of the NBA's best players, as it should be. So Jokic, Curry, Embiid, Giannis, Jason Tatum, number 5, Chris Paul, 6, LeBron, 7, Luka, 8, and then Rudy Gobert, 9, Donovan Mitchell, 10. But there's no real outliers there. I don't know that anybody at this moment would argue Rudy Gobert is the 9th best player in the league, but it's close, right? You're not looking at like I don't know, any random rotation player in the top 10. So the highest rated Timberwolves player on this list every year, going back since, I mean, outside of the Jimmy Butler season, would be Karl-Anthony Towns. And he's ranked relatively high on this list. There's nothing to sneeze at where he landed. And we'll get to that here in a minute. But D'Angelo Russell, league wide, according to ESPN Real Plus Minus, has the 16th best total RPM in the entire league. It's number 16. So I already listed the top 10. I might as well just fill in the gap there. Trae Young's 11. Jaren Jackson Jr. with Memphis is 12. Obviously, there's a little the minutes played matters, and I'll get to that here in a minute. But he's also had a very nice season. Mike Conley, 13. Duncan Robinson of the Heat, number 14. Domantas Sabonis at 15. D'Angelo Russell, 16, which is one spot ahead of Kevin Durant, 2 spots ahead of Jimmy Butler, 3 spots ahead of DeJounte Murray, who ended up making the All-Star team this year. And then another All-Star, Fred VanVleet at number 20. Another All-Star, Jared Allen at number 22. James Harden, number 24. Devin Booker, number 25. So there might be a couple outliers in there. And again, I don't think anyone's arguing. I hope nobody's arguing that Duncan Robinson is the 14th best player in the league. But this is a pretty good list. And D'Angelo Russell being number 16 is notable. A couple additional points of context here. D'Lo's defensive real plus minus is 1.38, which is fine. It's not great. You look at point guards. If you just go to point guards and sort them by defensive real plus minus, that's what, number 17 in defensive real plus minus among point guards. Chris Paul, for instance, is over a 5. He's a 5.33. Patrick Beverley, by the way, is a 1.73. He's 15th, which is low for him. D'Angelo Russell's 17th in defensive real plus minus. But that's by far D'Lo's best mark. If you go back and look at him every year in his career, he's always been a negative in defensive real plus minus. So to see him as a clear positive is fantastic. He's also 6th in offensive real plus minus among point guards, behind only Trae Young, Steph Curry, Luka Doncic, Damian Lillard, Ja Morant. Those are the only guys ahead of him in terms of offensive real plus minus. So a phenomenal season for D'Lo so far. The defense matters. And there's other factors. It's not a true measure of individual. I'm not saying he's necessarily the 17th best defensive point guard in the league because of this list, but the fact that it's the best by far he's ever ranked, it's the only time he's ever been positive, and he's a positive 1.38 in defensive real plus minus. That is notable. It matters. And it's that incremental improvement, and really more than that, almost a little bit of a jump this year defensively for D'Angelo Russell. And he needs to be commended for that. Karl-Anthony Towns, incidentally, he's number 29 on the real plus minus list, which not bad. I mean, you go back to last year, look at overall the overall real plus minus, and Karl-Anthony Towns did not finish in the top 40 league wide. Of course, he had the injury issues last year, and it just was not a great year for Karl-Anthony Towns. He finished 63rd in terms of overall real plus minus last season. This year, he ranks number 29. You look at centers, and he is number 7 among centers league wide as well. Which I think, generally speaking, people would say he's the third best big after Jokic and Embiid. I think that's probably true. There's other factors that play into this. Another really good way to sort this, by the way, is if you go to ESPN, they've also got a column for RPM wins. And what that does is that factors in the estimated number of wins each player contributes based on number of possessions played. So Towns in straight up RPM ranks 7th, but he's behind guys like Robert Williams III from Boston, Al Horford, also of Boston, who have just simply played a lot less than Karl-Anthony Towns. If you sort it by wins, which takes into account number of possessions, Towns is indeed number 3 in the league, behind just Jokic and Embiid. So considering that, I mean, that obviously changes where he ranks league wide. So instead of 29th in overall RPM, he's actually 15th if you sort by RPM wins. And every player ahead of him, I believe everybody but maybe one guy, I think Miles Bridges is the only guy on this list that wasn't an all-star that ranks ahead of Towns in terms of RPM wins for the season. So a nice ranking for Karl-Anthony Towns. I was a little surprised he wasn't higher. Now he's played so well lately, so we could continue to see that number rise here moving forward. I want to spend just a quick minute talking about Anthony Edwards. Now, Ant did not rank highly in this metric last year, and he didn't rank highly in really any metric. The dunks were awesome. The scoring numbers were gaudy at times as a rookie, but overall, Ant was not efficient. He was not good defensively, and there wasn't any question that he wasn't a clear positive player last year. I mean, the Wolves weren't a good team, and Ant played in every game. So, I mean, that tells you he clearly wasn't anywhere near like an all-star caliber level last season. This year, however, Anthony Edwards has played much, much better. He finds himself in total real plus minus. He's number 46th on the list, which is nothing to sneeze at, a 3.5. Importantly, he's a positive defensive real plus minus. The most interesting thing to me about this is that he's just 3 spots behind LaMelo Ball, who, of course, beat him out for rookie of the year last year, made the all-star team this year when Edwards did not. And of course, Ball was drafted 3rd in 2020 when Edwards was drafted 1st. So they're always going to be tied together. The Hornets and Wolves are both supposed to be up and coming type teams. The Hornets were maybe a little ahead of schedule last year. Now this year have disappointed. But Ball's number 43, Edwards is 46. Number 49, old friend Andrew Wiggins, which I don't know, kind of hilarious to me that, and again, I always have to add this caveat. I don't hate Andrew Wiggins. I like Andrew Wiggins. He seems to be a great person. I'm happy that he's happy. I'm happy that he's winning with the Warriors. It wasn't going to work out in Minnesota to the extent that everybody thought that it maybe could have. But I mean, he's an all-star starter. That shouldn't have happened. And here he is. He's 3 spots behind Anthony Edwards in ESPN's real plus minus. I just think it's really funny. He's a solid positive defensive real plus minus, but he's a negative offensive impact in terms of offensive real plus minus. So I think that's pretty funny. If you sort RPM wins, though, which again takes into account number of possessions, Edwards rockets from 46th to 23rd league wide because he plays so many possessions, and those numbers can get dragged down by that. So he's actually 23rd. So if you sort the whole thing by RPM wins, it actually knocks Russell down a little bit and Edwards and Towns up. So Towns, Edwards, and Russell are all still in the top 29. It puts Towns at 15, Edwards at 23, and Russell at 29. It truly is a big 3. You've got 3 guys in the top 30 in ESPN RPM wins. I think that's a big 3. I mean, how many other teams can say that? I didn't pull this ahead of time, but there's not very many teams. I mean, Utah's got 2, Phoenix has 2. There's a couple, obviously, with Booker and Paul. Boston, I guess, just has the one. I don't think there's any teams that have 3 players in the top 30 in RPM wins. Minnesota would be the only one. And also, I mentioned, I take that back. John Morant's actually 30th. So that gives Memphis 3 because Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bain is surprisingly at number 26. And John Morant is 30. So I wanted to mention Morant. Obviously, he's incredible. I'm not about to suggest that he's not. But this is a metric that can kind of see through some of the defensive issues and some of the efficiency problems. Now, offensively, Morant is still a beast, and he is efficient because of what he can do. He doesn't need to be a jump shooter. He can get to the rim so easily and draw fouls and all that comes with that. But he's still a negative defensively. So in terms of RPM wins, John Morant is number 30 in the league behind D'Angelo Russell. If you want to just look at straight up regular RPM, same thing. John Morant is number 9. D'Angelo Russell's number 6 among point guards. So because of the defensive issues, ESPN Real Plus Minus does not think all that highly about John Morant, who's folks are trying to put him in the MVP conversation, and I think it's justified. But interesting to see a excuse me, a well-respected metric like ESPN Real Plus Minus feel a certain way about John Morant. So again, not the end all be all, but the best individual metric, in my opinion. If you're going to pick one, this is the one to look at. You can, you get into a debate with somebody about ESPN players or about NBA players. Pull this. I don't know why I keep interchanging ESPN and NBA. Go ahead and pull up this list, and it can be a pretty good starting point. You can also see the flaws here too, right? I mean, centers a lot of times will rank really highly in these types of metrics. Same thing with win shares, and you can kind of see through some of that noise. But generally speaking, this is a really solid metric to kind of hang your hat on. Okay, let's close the show today by looking at the Western Conference standings and where the Timberwolves sit and what's upcoming for the Wolves, and especially for the Nuggets, but also for the Clippers. These are kind of the 3 teams that we're going to have to the Nuggets, Wolves, Clippers keep an eye on here moving forward as they're going to be battling it out for the 6, 7, and 8 spots in the West. So we're going to do that here next. First, though, let's talk about our friends at Rock Auto. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry? You have a computer with access to rockauto.com both at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you could possibly need, from brake parts to tail lamps, motor oil to even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solution to your auto part needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, let's go ahead and talk standings. So the Timberwolves have been in the 7th spot now for a while. We know that. I said this at the break. I thought it was probably a 2/3 to 3/4, 65 to 75% chance the Wolves actually finish in the 7th spot the rest of the year and or when it's all said and done. And I think they're just as likely to get up to 6 as they would be to fall to 8. I got a little nervous the other day after the Wolves lost. They got blown up by Philadelphia, and the Nuggets had won at that time, I think, 5 straight. They built the winning streak to 6 straight. They were up like 3.5 games on the Wolves for the 6th spot. But now the Timberwolves have won 2 straight, impressive wins over, albeit shorthanded, Cleveland and Golden State teams, but still 2 wins against 2 of the top teams. 2 teams that are each top 4 in their respective conferences at the time. I guess the Cavs aren't anymore, but 2 playoff teams certainly. But now Denver on Wednesday night lost at home to the Thunder, snapping a 6-game winning streak for the Nuggets. And of course, the Thunder are miserable. And the Nuggets were favored by like 12 or 15 or something crazy. They lost by 12 to the Thunder in Denver. Just a really terrible loss for the Nuggets. And that pulls the Wolves to back within 2.5 games of the 6th spot. They're still a game and a half clear of the Clippers, although Los Angeles has won 4 consecutive games. They did not play on Wednesday. But I don't know. I still feel okay. I mean, Denver's got to reintegrate Jamal Murray, potentially Michael Porter Jr., who's apparently a little bit ahead of Jamal Murray in terms of his chance to come, or his odds of coming back. And Denver blew an opportunity to extend this thing to a 7-game win streak. And by the way, on tap, they've got Houston and then New Orleans. So they easily could have ended up with like a 9-game winning streak had they taken care of business against the Thunder. Now they play Houston Friday night, New Orleans on Sunday. Those are both probably wins for Denver. And then it finally gets a little more difficult. They've got Golden State, Sacramento, Golden State, Toronto, Philadelphia. They've got Cleveland upcoming. It's actually not all that different from what the Wolves have on their upcoming schedule, with a few easy ones here, and then it gets really difficult again. Um, so I don't know. I don't feel really all that differently about it now than I did a week ago. I think that the Wolves are 3-1 since the break. The Nuggets are also 3-1 since the break. So we're kind of right back where we started All-Star weekend. And we'll see if Denver's able to kind of bounce back from this. In terms of the Wolves, obviously the Anthony Edwards knee thing is something to monitor. I mean, they've got the Thunder on Friday night. We'll break that one down in terms of a preview on Friday's show. Wolves Thunder Friday, and then they head back home on Saturday. The old 1-game road trip, come back home on Saturday night to take on the Portland Trailblazers. And Portland got waxed on national TV by the Suns by 30 points on Wednesday night. So they get at Oklahoma City Friday, home for Portland, off Sunday, off Monday. So again, back-to-back 2 days off. Or no, I'm sorry, they're only off Sunday, and then they play Portland again at home on Monday. So Portland sits in the Twin Cities over the weekend and plays the Wolves on Saturday and Monday. And then the Wolves stay at home to play the Thunder next Wednesday. So the next 4 are 2 against Oklahoma City, 2 against Portland, 3 of the 4 at home. And then they do the Florida 2-step, another back-to-back next weekend, Friday, Saturday in Orlando and Miami. So again, Orlando on the schedule. So the next 5 games are all games in which the Timberwolves will be favored. And really, if the Timberwolves don't pick up a game to a game and a half over the next week to 10 days, it'll be a disappointment. I mean, 5 consecutive games the Wolves will be favored in. Denver's got a couple easy ones in there, but realistically, Minnesota should be within a game to a game and a half when we're sitting here, maybe after next weekend, call it. So, a week from Monday, the Timberwolves should be a game to a game and a half back of Denver and should be able to pick up some ground. Of course, the Wolves play Denver one more time this year. It's not until April 1st, so we're almost a month away from that still. A Friday night game. That should be a lot of fun. And the Timberwolves have a 2-1 series lead, so they will have a chance to keep the tiebreaker over Denver. Incidentally, they've already completed the season series against the LA Clippers. They've lost that one 3-1, so there is no tiebreaker advantage for the Wolves against the Clippers, who are, again, only a game and a half back from the Timberwolves as of right now in the standings. And of course, they hope to get Paul George and Kawhi Leonard back, but TBD on that. All right. So Wolves Thunder Friday night. We'll preview that contest on Friday, among other things on the show. So be sure you're following and subscribed to the program and that you tune in on Friday. Of course, you can watch on YouTube. You can listen on any of your favorite podcast platforms, from Apple to Google, Spotify to Odyssey, really anywhere. You can also follow on Twitter at Locked On T-Wolves and at Beecken. And that's with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. A reminder that Locked On Wolves is, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. And as long as you're making Locked On Wolves your first listen, we thank you for that. You can make your second listen Locked On NBA. Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NBA every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.